Hi.
Hello. Hello,
Hi.
everyone. Welcome to Game Changers. Hi, Karina. Hi, Nirit. Hi, Ray. Good to see you
Hi.
all.
Great to be here.
Well, wonderful. Well, I'm really excited about the topics we've got going today. But first, want to say thanks to everybody who's going to be joining live or watching us at a later date. We would love for everybody who's online with us on this Thursday to drop their name and location in the chat. We want to see who's participating. And so please do that. And while we're doing that, I would love to ask our panelists a timely yet very important question, which is, what is your favorite Halloween costume? And how does it relate to HR? And maybe this isn't even one that you've worn, but you're thinking about wearing. What's on the docket for tomorrow night or tomorrow for your office parties?
Oh, that's such a good question, Janelle. I'll say that my favorite Halloween costume I've ever done was Cruella de Vil. She was my favorite to be. I loved it. I loved my Cruella wig. I certainly don't skin employees and turn them into jackets, but I think there's definitely a perception of villainy, within HR. Nirit, I'm sure you feel that same thing.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. We should all just actually be angels, right?
Yes.
We need to turn the narrative on its head. But Cruella de Vil, that's a great one. Nareet, how
Yeah.
about you?
By the way, there is a research that in the old time, all the female heroines were either a princess or a witch. So, but I think I will, in order to make it, related to the HR, I think that, a 50-minute call could be a great custom. And then this is the one thing that people really scared of from HR, right?
Yes, a 15-minute calendar invite hold. I think would definitely leave everyone shaking in their boots. Hi, Ray.
Hi.
Hi. So same question for you. What's a Halloween, your favorite Halloween costume while we're just kind of getting warmed up here, and how might it relate to HR?
Oh, geez. I think my favorite Halloween costume is Yoda, and
Ooh.
Hmm.
and how that relates to HR. There's this thought process sometimes that Yoda is all knowing and knows all the right things to do all the time, and yeah, so secret recipe that Yoda has.
I love it. I love it. Yoda. I can see it now. It sounds fantastic. Well, great. Well, I'm going to go ahead and pop open our slides here.
And also so positive, Ray. Much better than the witches.
All right. Can everyone see the slides that we have up on the screen? Fantastic. Well, I am so glad to be kicking off this webinar today. And so welcome everybody to our HR Game Changers series. If this is your first time, we're glad to have you. If you're a return visitor, thanks for stopping by again. But this is a multi-themed, multiple episode series. And today is our 14th episode. If only were our 13th, it would have been far more Halloween themed, but what can we do? During these panels, we explore how HR can help harness AI while staying true to its people first mission. And if you have peers or colleagues who would like to join the series, we'll share the registration link so you can invite them at a later date. And for those of you who are joining at home or at work, we do have a live Q&A throughout. So if you have a question at any given time during the webinar, just drop it in the chat. I will keep an eye on all of those fantastic questions that we know you have. So let's take a look and see who we all are on the call today. So first, I'm Janelle. I'm your moderator. I used GoProfiles for a year in my previous company at Red AI and loved it. And now I work at Stripe in a talent, brand, and recruiting capacity. And I'm really grateful to continue the opportunity and the relationship with this fantastic product and group. And so today we're going to be talking about culture-led growth and how values-based leadership fuels not only employees and employee performance, but company growth too. sure we all have a lot of stories about how these values can really make an impact. And we have a fantastic panel today that I'm so excited to introduce to you all. So before I introduce the panels, here is the question. It's always the same one, but it's always a good one. Tell the group, what was your first paying job and what was your most recent paying job? And you can go as far back as you want. And your first job can have nothing to do with your current job. So with that, I'd like to introduce Nirit. Nirit, would you like to come off mute and introduce yourself?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hello. So I think my first paid job was actually in a greenhouse. So I was, harvesting the plant and, make them look beautiful and grow. And I think it's actually connected very well to HR and to my current job as a CPO at HiBob. Sometimes I do use, even the metaphor of an organization like a garden. We have to keep on maintain, help use all the water and the sun and everything, to make it grow, take the bad weeds out. So yeah, that's, I would say, the connection, and a little different, but
I love it.
interesting.
And you've been in recruiting far too long when I immediately thought of Greenhouse, the applicant tracking system. And that I was like, wow, your first job was at an applicant tracking system company. And I didn't even associate it with a proper, gorgeous, beautiful, loving nature greenhouse. So that is fantastic. All right, next, Karina, welcome.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me here. I'm Karina Young. My first paying job is actually very timely with the Halloween theme because my real first W-2 job was working for a costume store in the city I grew up in. I worked there all throughout middle school and high school. And I was actually the wig manager. That was my title. I was responsible for
Wig
wigs and
manager.
yes, I have a giant box of wigs thanks to that job, which make Halloween very, very easy. Not so much related to what I do now as VP of People at 15.5. But, I'll say any job working in a customer facing service, whether it's retail or in the food industry, certainly teaches you a lot about patience and empathy and dealing with people in high pressure situations, because there is nothing like very angry customers coming in on the night of Halloween looking for a costume you're sold out of, and you've got to find a solution. You've got to keep a happy face. So I'll say my many years in retail definitely lean on a lot of those skills still in HR today in my journey in tech in the last 10, 12 years.
Amazing. Well, and maybe those wigs can come in handy. You can wear them from time to time and say, no, you were talking to the other VP of People, right?
Yeah.
I'm not her. She has pink hair, right? That's
exactly. Yeah. I can have an alter ego for
I love
sure.
it. I love it. Depending on which wig Karina is wearing. And then last, but certainly not least, Ray, welcome. And what was your first paying job and your most recent job?
Oh, my first W-2 paying job was I was a hostess and cashier, and 2 months into that, got promoted to trainer of hostesses and cashiers.
Wow.
At a place called Uncle Bud's Catfish Chicken and such. And so, yeah, it was definitely a learning experience. It definitely, some of the lessons that I learned early on there definitely translate to what I do now, for sure. As Karina mentioned, when you're in a customer facing environment, it teaches you all sorts of things: patience, empathy, but yeah, it teaches you a lot. And it does. What I'm doing now, I can see that some of the pieces that I learned even there translate into me being the SVP of People and Culture here at Arbinger, because it's a people-centric company, and as that position taught me, it's all about people and how you treat them.
Amazing. Well, I love the kind of the theme that ran throughout, that while the jobs had nothing to do with what you're currently doing, it sounds like a lot of the lessons and the opportunity and the work ethic has instilled and shaped you into the leaders that you are, which is fantastic. Well, let's move on and start getting into our topics. But before we do go, I did drop the GoProfiles GameChangers invite in there. And I also just want to put a call out for GoProfiles, which is a fantastic product, and they're our sponsor for today. They do a great job of balancing the need and desire for AI while building people-centric culture. And so I'll drop that link as well. But let's get on to the main event, which is our discussion points. And so today we've got a lot of fantastic things to talk about. Our questions are going to focus on defining culture-led growth, what it means to lead with culture, building aligned leadership, how leaders can model values to create trust, clarity, and consistency, driving engagement and retention, the connection between strong culture and improved employee satisfaction. I know this is probably definitely a hot topic with how interesting and unique the job market is right now, how you scale culture with intent, and tying culture to profitability. I'm excited to hear from our panelists who will share with us real-life examples of how cultural investments impact decision-making, innovation, and financial performance. And so with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see these lovely faces here. And we've got a list of questions. Please, listeners, continue to type them into the chat. But for the first question, and feel free to kind of jump in as you see fit, I'd like to ask you, what does culture-led growth actually mean to you? And why should organizations prioritize it?
Yeah, I think it's such a good question to start with, Janelle, for the whole topic. When I think about culture-led growth, it really is about kind of leading and creating a system of accountability for the values that you set as a culture, right? So, whatever that growth means, whether it's your profitability, your people, the size of your teams, really making sure that it's all connected back to that foundation you've built as a company. Why do we exist? What matters to us? What are the behaviors that we want to model and we want to bring out into the organization? That you have a really strong connection to your culture, and that helps you make the decisions that fuel your growth and really bring in the right results to your team.
Great. Nirit?
Yeah, I fully agree. And, I think that when you scale or grow a company, it's not only about growth, it's how you grow right, how you grow intentionally and in a good way. And I think that many times, specifically, I don't know, in my company, for example, we are a founder-led company. The early days when we were very small, it was the DNA was, coming from the founder. It was 150 employees. It was very easy. But then you need to start to build, the muscles, how you are injectioning the DNA and structuring it in a way that we can, go around different geos or, really create this culture that will be across the world. And I think that for that, as Karina said, we have to create the values, have to create a leadership code, all those things that are not in the air and does not, just transfer from one person to another, rather is in the engine of the company. It's like it's the real DNA, but it's a written one. It has, all the rituals and all the understanding of really how we are expected to behave, how do we manage things, how do we transfer information, and so on. And I think, it's a very well-known sentence, right? That culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yes.
And I think no matter, what you do at the end, if your culture is not the right one, and I don't think that there is one right culture, right? Again, as Karina said, it really depends what you want to achieve. I think for us at HiBob, for example, we are a product-led company, so we want to be innovative. We want to be friendly. We want to create this psychological safety where people know that they can fail and explore and continue to grow.
Sure.
Each company probably has its own culture that really support the strategy and what we want to achieve.
Fantastic. So follow up to that. How can companies measure the impact of culture on business performance? Does anyone have any kind of real life examples of where you've seen it actually be able to be measured and seen within the business?
I think one of the key ways that you can do that is one, just through discussion with team members, right? Number one, surveys are always easy. I don't want to say always easy, but they're easy to send out, right? But if that's your only measure, that's not going to be helpful, but it does give you some indication. But we can't get away from those individual discussions that our HR teams have with team members. And then those can be tied to how does that overall department performing? Because that's when you see some of those trends of, well, everyone has low morale in this team, and then the department is not doing well, whereas everybody absolutely loves being at this team and feels psychologically safe. And it's amazing how that correlates to better performance overall. So for me, it's surveys and actually having those individual discussions and making time for them.
I think the survey call is a really good one. I also think it's really important to make sure that you're willing to explore what the survey tells you, because I think there's nothing more unsatisfying to an employee when someone says, tell me about this thing that you really care about and how much it's not going well. And then the leadership is not actually willing to do anything about it. You sort of get their hopes up. So I think I liked what you said, that they're not always easy. Does anyone else have any thoughts on how we could continue to kind of measure impact on business performance?
I want to add maybe to what Ray said. We have a strategy that we call continuous listening. So it's a combination of survey, roundtable, checking point with employees, and we really try to gather all this information and then act upon it. The feedback can be very diverse, from people who is not happy with the office. But again, if your culture is you want to make a safe work environment and a homely one where people feel good, then if the toilet doesn't work well, if the coffee machine doesn't work well, it's not a good example for the culture. Or if you talk about transparency and this is one of your values, but actually you do not act in a transparent way. Again, I think that employees fail very quickly if you say one thing and do another thing. And again, this is also something that really can hit, when you want to have a culture-led growth and strategy.
Fantastic.
Yeah, one thing I just want to add to that real quick is, Ray and Nirit, as you two are talking about surveys and continuous listening, I think one of the biggest levers I'm sure we've all felt in our organizations for creating that culture performance connection is through our leaders. And so that's where I actually feel like one of your biggest forms of measurement can be is how effective are your managers, because our people teams can only scale and do so much in the org. We actually need our leaders to really represent that culture, what great performance looks like, what are the values that we stand for. And so if we can measure how effective they are in their roles or being a part of that culture-led growth, it's a really great indicator of where we need to give more support, where can we amplify what's working well.
I think that's a fantastic call out. I also want to note that Jennifer Kwok in the chat said they believe that surveys only work for very large companies. People are afraid to give their thoughts because they know who said what based on personality. And I do think company size and these things does definitely matter. So I'm going to move us along to the next question. How can leadership teams authentically model organizational values to build trust and clarity?
I think for me, one of the key pieces is, do your leaders actually understand the values of the company? Too often we think that somebody's a great individual performer. We just promote them up to leadership with no training on how to be a leader, no investment on leadership. And so I think one of the key things is, how well do the leaders understand the values of the company? How do they know how to translate those values into each and every interaction that they're doing? And how do they model that? And we invest in those leaders to help them move forward with that type of strategy.
Yeah, and I think when you do that more often, to come back even to what Jennifer was saying in the chat, I actually think that's where you get that psychological safety and trust that should empower employees to give their feedback, whether you're a large or small organization. Because when I see something like that, it makes me wonder, like, okay, like what is broken in that safety? Because even in small teams, I've been in we're a company of 12, 30 people, we're in the early hundreds. There are plenty of people who still feel comfortable giving feedback knowing that it's not going to be punitive. So if that's a fear, that's definitely something to target with what's happening with the leaders and how are they disconnected from those values that you're setting, or are your values actually matching your company? It's like you don't want to be putting something out there and then actually having leaders do something totally disparate from that and creating distrust.
Absolutely. Leadership is definitely key. And you got some head nods in the chat for that. So as a follow-up question, what are some common missteps that you've seen leaders make when trying to align culture with strategy? Maybe, over-indexing in either direction.
I think that one of our values is actually we do what we say. which is very simple but very difficult to deliver, I would say. And we call out. I mean, I don't think that we have like huge issues, but whenever we see a leader that, for example, is not acting in transparency or is not empowering people, then we call it out and we explain and we explain, what's the impact on the team if this is happening. So I feel that, it's part of the education, right? I mean, maybe it's a new manager, he just arrived. As Ray said, we need to educate, we need to explain what does it mean, how does it work. Yeah, and I think it's very crucial. I mean, if we do not create this one language for all the leadership, we actually this year launched a leadership code, which is kind of, build on the values, but also create even more expectation from the leaders, what are the attributes, what are the behavior, and how it translates into action
Sure.
for those leaders.
That's a great call out.
And I liked what you said right there when you were talking about how you're aligning with the values. Like one of our values is to honor people, individual humanity in every interaction that we have with people. That's a value. But if you don't know that as a leader, then how are you going to represent that on a regular basis? But then even more importantly, how does that show up for you? What does that look like? How do you interpret that? So putting our values out there is one thing, but if we're not really working through how the person interprets that and what that means with every interaction with each and every person, not just your favorite people, then there's a problem with that for sure.
I think those are all great points. And I also think there's sometimes a fear from leadership to actually tell people what they already know because they think maybe they don't see the culture's changing, or maybe they don't feel this. They do. They feel it, I think, far often faster than even people at the most senior levels do, right? When things are shifting or changing for better or for worse. And so, lean in there and be bold and kind of take ownership of the narrative rather than it just being something everyone talks about, but no one says anything about. And so then a follow-up question on that. How can leaders ensure their actions, not just words, reinforce company values consistently?
I think one of the easiest ways to do that is to actually just really simplify what that means, right? Like if you have a set of standards, they should be simple and easy to adopt and that you follow through with them with a level of real accountability. And this came up in some of the examples Ray and Nirit already shared. But for an example, if you have a standard in your leadership, what you just said, Ray, recognize humanity in every person, every interaction. So then what happens when you don't? So like, what is the real accountability? Who's responsible for that? And then see it through every single time. And oftentimes companies put so many things out there when it comes to culture and leadership and performance. And there's like 20 different systems. Like just have a few that you do really, really well and that your employees trust in. And then you can build on top of that, but just do more with less. I think that hits and resonates much more with employees.
Yeah. Love that.
And I think that, at the end, it's really walk the talk, right? I mean, if the senior leadership is behaving in this way, I think this is the strongest testimonial and the strongest impact on the culture, right? I mean, because younger manager will, resonate and they will learn and they will do the same. So I always put a lot of emphasis on the alignment and on the way that the senior leadership is acting and presenting the value.
Fantastic. And Irene said it best in the comments. Simplify complexity. Couldn't have said it better myself. All right. So next question, and this is one I'm really excited about. What role does strong culture play in employee engagement and retention? Tell us how to keep all of our people. We're all listening.
So it's key to engagement and to retention. And I think it was Jennifer who put something in there about the surveys, which Karina picked up on as well. If you don't have that strong psychological safety culture, people aren't going to be engaged, and you are going to find a problem with retention. Right now, companies are experiencing pretty good retention because the job market is so tough. But when the job market opens back up then if there are little issues here and there, those people are going to leave. And so this is the time to really double down and invest in that culture, to make sure that your people want to stay and to make sure that you have a healthy culture before the doors open and people are starting to leave again. Because I think right now we're getting a false sense of safety to a degree, because people are staying in situations where they might not necessarily feel like it's the healthiest culture, but they can't find something else.
I learned the term for it today. Someone told me it was called job hugging. Job hugging. I guess that's what the youth are calling it these days. So there you go. Now we know a Gen Z term. What else? What other things kind of play into employee engagement and retention?
I think it's all of the things that we are already mentioned. You know, how the leadership is actually leading, translating, behaving. I think that at least for us, you know, the continuous listening to the team and act upon their feedback. And as we all said, you know, it's changing all the time, right? I mean, maybe now in the Netherlands they are very happy, and in Germany they are feeling frustrated. So we need to keep upon and you know, like addressing those issues all the time. And this also in turn create trust, create, you know, the ability to have a dialogue. And I think that people want to be seen, right? They want to feel that we hear them, we understand their pain. I think, you know, not always you have to really do whatever they ask, because sometimes we cannot. But I think that we can address it, we can explain why, we can explain, you know, why we cannot maybe give you another 30 days of vacation. And all this, you know, like you know, all of us have like funny requests from time to time. But I think that we have in the company, for example, we have part of the culture is, you know, allowing better work-life balance. So we agreed that everybody will have like the long weekend to disconnect. I had to fight quite a lot with the CEO, and he always said, "But they have their vacation days," and I said, "No, but you know, we have to do it together and really disconnect." And then I think in the last survey there was one person saying, "Oh, why can't we use the balanced weekend whenever we want?" We were like, "Okay, let me explain." But really, I mean, the why I think is so important.
Sure.
And make everybody feel, you know, more connected.
Yeah, there's a big connector between all of it too, to what motivates people, right? Like for a lot of business leaders, it can feel hard for I think HR leaders in particular to advocate for culture, right? Because it can feel soft and mushy, and how do I put something around this? But if you think about it like a fish tank, right? Like if our workplaces are the fish tank, like the water is the culture. And the fish has to be in there, right? The fish, like we've got to breathe, we got bills to pay, like we all have things we need the paycheck for. But how you operate in that tank all depends on how you're treated. What are you putting in there? Am I keeping the water clean? Am I feeding you? Am I caring for you? Do I think like well about you? Am I giving you all the things you need to thrive? Because if not, you're going to slowly start to wither away. And as a business, you're never going to achieve the results that you want with people who feel like you are totally disconnected from them, or you have no interest, you have no connection to their own motivators and desires. Doesn't matter what generation you're from, what department you're in, we all have something unique that gets us to want to be there. And that's what your culture is really trying to get at is, can I connect with your passion, your motivation? Is this a mission that you feel particularly compelled about? Those are those things that make people show up and perform to their very best as often as possible, instead of just showing up, punching the clock and going home. Like that's the difference between just a business that's just kind of coasting versus one that's really thriving.
Love the fish tank analogy. And also it could be a Halloween costume, Finding Nemo, right? We've got another one to tie back from the question, but I thought that was a beautiful answer. The next question. So kind of on the heels of what we were just talking about, how it makes people feel, can you share some examples of where cultural investments directly influence business outcomes like innovation or financial performance?
Absolutely. So I think one of the key pieces with culture is really having team members understand the expectations of them, expectations of the company, expectations of your leader. And we use something here called the 3A plus system. And so monthly team members can reach out to their team leader They fill out a form with regards to the roles, and they are rating themselves on how they feel like they're doing in each of these roles. And it's just really a great opportunity for the leader and the team member to just have an open discussion about how they feel about how the team member feels they're doing, how the leader feels they're doing, and really collaborate totally on that. But it's an expectation that we talk about here on a regular basis. And we even have it in the job descriptions so that people just know that's part of being a team member here. And that's part of our culture that's just woven in. So I think that's a critical piece.
I love that. Any other thoughts on that? If not, I have a follow-up question.
I think just one of the, I guess, the biggest ways it really connects to tangible results is the way that people perform and their productivity. Like, if you want to be able to say, this is what we did in culture that led to this result. I mean, there's certainly I think, Nirit, you were saying it earlier that, one of the values at HiBob is around innovation. People don't innovate on their own. Like, you don't just show up somewhere and are like, I'm innovative and I'm going to change this company. You create the conditions for those behaviors. So anything you want as a business result needs to be nurtured and cared for. And that's the real connection there.
Mm-hmm.
I agree, and even in the simplest way, I mean, if the turnover is rising, of course there is a huge business impact, right? So when we talk about engagement and retention, it's not just because it's soft HR measurement. We know that if we have this vicious circle of people going out and we have to recruit, train, and it will have a really bad impact on the business. And I think when people are not engaged, I mean, sometimes they do have trees, but or jobs, but I think that overall, when people are not happy, they will work less good and will be less productive. Yeah, so totally agree with you.
Fantastic. So next question, what does it mean to implement a people first approach in practice? I think people first is something we're hearing a lot. It's very sort of buzzworthy and clickbaity. But what does that actually mean to you when you're a leader at an organization and you are people first?
I think where I've seen people first that be most effective is just the idea that you always have the lens of your people and your culture on and available. That doesn't always mean that actually has to be your literal first thought or first action in everything you do. But when it comes to making a decision, creating a shift, setting a priority, that you can pull that up and say, okay, how is this going to affect the people? What are my team members going to think about this? How do I need to manage the change? That's never your fourth, fifth, sixth afterthought. It's somewhere very early in the process and a part of your very intentional design.
And I think that the people first can be again very wide from one angle, but if you think about for example, now everybody speaks about AI, right, and how we need to transfer into AI. But if you forget the people within it, it would not work, right? So you have to think how am I going to make them feel comfortable, safe, so they explore. They're willing to test it instead of thinking how, oh my God, I'm going to lose my job. We, for example, did a really big slogan around it, and the CEO said, we are doing more with more to make sure that people feel that it's not a big threat on their head. And we discussed a lot, the fact that it doesn't matter if you stay at HiBob or decided to leave, we're going to give you the skills so you're going to be a better employee equipped with AI. And I think, if you always think about the human aspect in every action, a little bit like Karina said, the length or the aspect, or this is how the strategy will work, and it's going to be a people first one.
When I'm thinking of people first as well, similar to Karina and Nirit, I'm also you're thinking of the individual team members who are part of your organization, but also how are those leaders interacting with the team members? What are they doing to recognize the team members? And I'm not talking necessarily about monetarily, but how are we training our leaders to make sure that they're embracing moments in team members' lives? Everyone wants to feel seen. So whether you have a team member who just got married and you recognize that and say something or send a card, it's all those little bitty things that really are big things that add to the culture, but then also really feed into that people first approach as well.
Love that. Love that. I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'm going to go into some of our audience generated questions. So what are some key steps that listeners today could take to intentionally shape and sustain a high performance culture over time? Anything that they should, think about doing tomorrow?
You go
Go
first.
ahead. No, I wanted to say that now we are talking a lot about challenge versus care. So, I think that from one side, we really want to continue and care for the people, make sure that they have all the conditions to be successful. From the other side, if they are not, we need to challenge, we need to make sure that, they have the right, I would say, training, tools, systems, but they also need uh, uh, to be a great employee and to perform well.
Yeah. Similar to Nirit, I would say you need to do an assessment. Start getting out there, and especially as a leader, just get out there and just talk to your team members. Make it a safe space for them to talk and not look for like an I got you moment. But that's what detracts from culture when we're looking for all those I got you moments, or didn't you already know? How could you not know? We don't want that type of thing. But do an assessment overall just to see where your culture is, and then does it align with the ideal culture that you want? And if not, then that's when you start those conversations of what could we do better? And if it's going great, okay, what else could you do to make it even better?
Yeah, I think if there's one thing folks can start doing today, as soon as you leave this, is just get curious. Just ask questions of your fellow leaders, of executives, of team members, of what are they seeing and feeling. Culture is, in many ways, it's so broad and such a big topic. There's so many different ways you can tackle this. Try to figure out what really matters right now to your company. What's the one thing that's really not working, whether that's through surveys and data, through conversations, and what's the one thing that is great that you want to amplify? Just get simple and ask questions, because what? People love to talk about themselves. They love to talk about their experience. Nobody's going to shut the door on you if you start to ask them questions. I guarantee that they will be very eager to tell you about their experience.
That is such great advice. Thank you, all of you. All right, well, we did get a couple of audience questions earlier in the week. So how could smaller organizations with limited resources start building a values-driven culture that still impacts business outcomes? So where do you start if you, I think we touched a little bit on it, but we may be taking kind of the resources into consideration.
I would say, the first place you start is to examine the values. Does everyone know the values, first of all? And then start looking in, as Karina said, get curious about how are these values showing up within the organization. But I think that when you see that the values should also align with the mission, when you look at that, and then you start looking at the other data, the conversations, the surveys, all of that, that's how you're going to be able to identify some things.
Great.
I don't think that we need a lot of resources. Culture is something that is it doesn't need like big tools. For example, you can do a really great work with the senior leadership or leaders to ask each one of them to demonstrate what is the one value that they really appreciate and how they think it can impact. So only a very few words or testimonial from a leader can go a really long way. It doesn't cost you anything, right? Of course, I think even in a small company, you have your performance reviews, which you can always include, the values and behaviors. When you provide recognition, right? Again, I'm sure that you do it also in a smaller organization. You can always tie it to one of the values and show how people demonstrate. So I feel that, if you're do it intentionally, you don't have to be a big company, or you don't have to have the resources. You just need to have it, in the back of your mind always. And how can you kind of integrate it into everything you do?
Yeah. And then one more from the audience. So last one. So what are the most effective ways that you have all used to get buy-in from leadership and frontline managers when trying to align culture with company strategy? Any practical tips?
I think a really practical tip is one, like find who your biggest co-influencers can be. If you have a particular leader or manager who is struggling to get behind that culture strategy connection, find someone else to be your partner. Being the lone voice on it is really, really hard. But if you can say, hey, I've talked to our chief marketing officer and our VP of development, and they're both really aligned to this, help me figure out how I can apply this to your organization. Again, come with that lens of curiosity. It can feel a lot less lonely. And I will say, like, I think one of my favorite questions very practically to ask is for any leader who is resistant is to just say, like, tell me more. Why doesn't culture feel important right now to your strategy? Get them to think about and articulate their own barrier. And that, I think, can help you figure out, where can I find my in? What do I need to give this person to help bring them on the journey?
Great advice.
Mm-hmm.
Well, all right. So I'm going to reshare our slides here. And we can go ahead and wrap this up. So thank you for everyone who submitted questions before, during the session. But now let's see where we're at. So I wanted to share just an update from GoProfiles. So earlier this year, GoProfiles surveyed nearly 400 HR leaders to understand their priorities for 2026. And the findings are pretty cool. Technology, especially AI, no shock there, and advanced analytics has moved from nice to have to the central wish list of most HR leaders. And the most successful organizations are using these tools to connect their people's strategies directly to the business outcomes, a lot of what we talked about today. And at the same time, many teams are still delivering standardized experiences and they might be missing some opportunities. This report highlights the divide between trailblazers and those stuck in maintenance mode. So you can kind of see here that there are people who are not quite there yet, and offering a clear blueprint for turning technology into measurable results for employees. Are there any thoughts from the panel on this?
I love what you say about kind of the difference between trailblazer and maintenance mode. I think that's just a good place for leaders to reflect on heading into 2026 is, how do you want to be seen as an HR organization? Because if you want to be seen as maintenance mode, or if that's really what your initiatives are aligned to, then that's the brand you're creating for yourself and your function. And sometimes that's just fine. That's not a judgment. Sometimes we need to be in a place for our businesses that is maintaining. But if you're ready to take a step into that trailblazer, then really think about what you need to do and what's missing, where you could just integrate it more. Ray, I think you were going to say something too.
Yeah, I was just going to talk about how is this aligning with the strategic priority of the organization overall, right? And so that's going to be a critical piece, is identifying where you want to be in 2026. And then if this ties to it, then absolutely that's something that you're going to want to link with it. I think all the companies are very much alive to the fact that technology is now fueling growth for sure. And so if that's part of something that we want to take into 2026, let's make sure that people are equipped with the proper training to help fuel that motivation, that momentum, sorry.
I would just add the fact that, now with AI that we are all a little tired of talking about, but I think it will create a lot of opportunities, right? To trailblaze, to do more things around, personalization, making sure that people feel that everything is more, into what they need. Of course, analytics and AI maturity is going to get, better. And I think it's going to be a really, really fascinating time for all of us. And we have to just lean in and jump into the water.
It's definitely going to be before and after. That is certain. What the after looks like, who knows? Well, maybe we'll be talking about it in our 2028 panel in a few more years. Well, thank you all for that. So just wanted to call out that we do have some upcoming episodes that you're more than welcome to register to. Our next one is in December, where we will talk about AI work. How timely, just never seems to be going away, does it? But we're really excited to welcome that panel on December 4th. And then our next panel will be in the new year on January 22nd, 2026, where we will talk about the leadership reset, essential leadership skills for 2026 and beyond. So very timely with the new year and new you and how you can show up to be the best leader possible. And then I also just want to give deep gratitude and thanks for our amazing panelists today. I really felt like we learned quite a lot from each and every one of you. Your answers were heartwarming and thoughtful and intelligent and smart, and just so many good tidbits, I think, for people to take away. So thank you. And then if you haven't checked out GoProfiles yet, please do so. They're a great tool. And they also offer a free trial. So if this is your first time getting exposure, go check it out. And I believe that is it. Thank you to everyone who made this possible. I'm going to stop sharing here and thank our crew one more time. Thank you, Nirit, Karina, and Ray, and to everyone listening. Hope you have a wonderful week and a happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.